I do think our generation is more soft. There's a disconnect in that sense where it's like, it's not a COVID mark writing that I was, hunched over a drafting table making for 2 hours. And he just told me like, no, don't. And I was like so heartbroken that this guy that I look up to is like, don't do this as a career. Starting as a freshman, the AI boom was kind of already happening. Personally, I'm afraid from seeing what the freshmen are doing might be lost.
Yeah.
That is a valuable skill. So when you see that someone who worked at Apple and Logitech and NVIDIA, that's no longer the criterion that we're looking for. It's how someone is executing something. I don't think any new grad wants to hear this, but honestly.
Hey everyone, it's Jon Thai here from Hatch Duo. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, our design AI intern, Alec Comito.
Hi, I'm Alec. I'm currently a senior at San Jose State. Going to be graduating in less than a month, so really soon. But I've had a great time here at Hatch so far. I've been here since January, about 4 months, and it's been quite the journey. It's a really interesting time to be here with the AI boom. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here today, Alec, and we're going to definitely jump into some fun topics. But before we do that, since it's the morning, there's been some news updates, and I think what we want to do is sprinkle this show with a little bit of technology updates, design updates, just stuff that we're into. So we'll try that out today. One thing that has been on my mind, because my kids do fencing, and tomorrow there's a special event, the World Fencing League. It's basically, fencing was this elitist kind of sport, and what they did was they actually made it really cool. So they're using AI technology to trace the blades and make them basically look like lightsabers and stuff like that. It was on Hypebeast, but the founder, Miles Chamley Watson, who's an Olympic medalist, a fencer, started this league to make fencing cool and accessible for kids to be into. So I think it's really cool. I don't know what you think about just the integration of technology with old school sports.
Yeah, I can imagine that's interesting. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, and honestly, I like the idea of being able to bring, like, it is a precise sport. Precision is what is the foundation of the actual experience of fencing, from what I understand.
Yeah.
It's all about finesse, foil, your stance, your grip, and to bring that into the actual criteria in a way that scoring is executed. I'm not familiar with the specifics like you are, but it seems like a natural fit. It meshes well already with the way that the sport is played and understood.
And I think now, especially with all this AI buzz right now of like data and analytics, like especially like we're seeing that show up even in things like basketball training, right? Where there's these things called Shoot 360, little gyms pop up where your shot is being analyzed by camera AI, and it's being tracked, and then the trajectory. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more sports just be very high tech.
Yeah. I feel like for a lot of consumers, it's visible when they watch the Super Bowl every year, right? Where we get to see different visuals and graphics and real-time stuff, or tracking, and then, let's redo this in a simulation for the audience to see. And it's like, that's the kind of level of change that we're probably going to see in fencing soon.
I mean, and who doesn't want to watch fencing and see that it looks like lightsabers? So with that, why don't we jump into some fun topics about you being a design student? I want to start off with your background, how you got into design, why you chose your design school, maybe a little bit about your design program, but what is it like being a industrial design student now, especially with, all the things that are going on right now, the AI revolution, the unemployment, plague that's going on with designers right now, and the pressures of being a design student in the Bay Area in particular, where we're kind of a hub for ID.
Yeah, so I'll give you the quick elevator pitch on my reason for joining ID. So I got into the creative space through ceramics. I've been doing it for over 10 years, essentially, mostly throwing pottery. And I really enjoyed the physical craft of it. I went from doing ceramics to carving wooden spoons to like all sorts of stuff that was just with my hands. So I was never formally taught ceramics, but my mentors, I was talking to 2 of them, and I had told them, I was like, I'm interested in pursuing ceramics as a career. And he's been doing this since he was 13. He's doing it for over 50 years, essentially. And he just told me, no, don't. And I was like so heartbroken that this guy that I look up to is like, don't do this as a career. He was telling me no retirement, no stable, 401k, and granted for ID right now, maybe that's also not the case, but
not here though.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, that really shifted my perspective and where I was going. So I talked with my dad. He was like, maybe this would be up your alley. And he showed me something that he wasn't kind of supposed to, but it was a little meeting with the team that he was working with at the time. It was the industrial design team talking to the engineers. And I was like, man, that is what I want to do. And it was this team showing off their work in ID. And I was like, I would love to do that. So I tried finding a school that would do it. And I think I was still in community college at the time. I went to Miracosta in SoCal. And from there, I found a school that I liked, and it was San Jose State because of several reasons. I was born in Redwood City. My grandma is still in Redwood City. And then I just found that San Jose State had a really interesting program that didn't require a portfolio, and that's important. But yeah, that's why I really ended up in ID. And starting as a freshman, the AI boom was kind of already happening.
Yeah.
San Jose State being a state school and having all these strong competitors around it, like CCA, Academy of Art, all these powerhouse design schools, were very much viewed as an underdog, right? Pre-COVID, students would have to buy giant draft kits and stuff, pens, pencils. Post-COVID, it's like a little tiny toolbox that you carry around. It is so dramatically shrunk.
Yeah.
And that toolkit has been replaced by AI in a way. The expectations of being able to draft something is no longer, but the expectation of being able to use VisCom is so much more there. Okay. And being able to visualize something and rapidly produce that through AI is now part of your toolkit.
Yeah. So let's jump into that a little bit. So obviously you're interning here, you're utilizing AI, you're probably one of the most proficient ones here on our team because you've been playing around with it, right, as you've been educated.
Since freshman.
But I guess comparing and contrasting, like when I went to school, we had to do the manual markers. The most digital we get is Photoshop, Sketchbook Pro stuff. How are you guys, at San Jose State in particular, like how are you guys learning about this? And you're saying you have a smaller toolkit. So are you guys not then learning about, you know, traditional sketching and drawing then as much? Or are we glossing over that? Like how does that impact your education?
Yeah, so I had to buy Copics. That was a necessity. But the current freshmen, they do, the amount of study that they do with Copics and hand rendering is 2 weeks, really. Yeah, they're getting such a condensed experience that I honestly believe the ability to rotate an object in your head is kind of dying. Like people are losing it. It's harnessed and garnered through doing marker renderings and understanding how light hits an object.
Yeah.
Now I can throw a simple sketch into VisCom and it just shows me what that looks like instead of me having to understand it.
Sure.
So when our project manager, Blake, says, oh, revisualize this at this angle, I can sketch it on a Post-it in 30 seconds, 15 seconds, right? And that's something that personally I'm afraid from seeing what the freshmen are doing might be lost.
Yeah.
That is a valuable skill in a workplace where it's like when someone asks you to visualize this, you should be able to do that.
Yeah. That's something that I've started to see a little bit pop up as well is obviously I'm pro using AI tools, but I think there's some inherent cons to it if you're not well traditionally trained as well, where, you know, if students are skipping over that part, like you said, where they're drawing and sketching by hand, that slow absorbent process of learning how to almost visualize 3 dimensions in your head through drawing, then when it's like when the VisCom or Midjourney is not exporting out the image exactly the angle that you want or the buttons that you want, are you even able to Photoshop that quickly? Or are you just going to keep typing and prompting over and over? And I think I've seen that at times where a designer is, you know, it's like, it's not giving me what I want. Well, just Photoshop it at that point, right? So that concerns me a little bit, but again, the capabilities of the tools, it's amazing what they can do now. How has that affected your peers in terms of employment, in terms of how you guys look at jobs, in terms of how competitive you are to other schools? I know my alma mater, Academy of Art, they're really embracing the tools. They have courses all for that. Does San Jose State have that? How do you feel about that?
I'd say for San Jose State, a lot of the tools that we're expected to have an understanding of for going into the working world, essentially, is a community-based thing. We never had a class that taught us Keyshot.
Interesting.
That never happened.
Okay.
Someone came in and talked to us about it, and it was a student. It was a senior, basically, that just came into a class. and told us how to use Keyshot.
Yeah.
So that's also the same for AI tools. I've helped teach students VisCom. I had someone reach out to me, this prompt isn't working for me. And so it is definitely a community-based thing. The resources that you're getting are through peers for the most part. Of course, the curriculum is adapting, and I see it every year. The projects I did as a freshman, only half of them exist for the freshmen. So San Jose State's doing a good job at updating curriculum to make sure students are getting what they need, but that happens every year, whereas AI is changing on a 3-month
or a
scale,
weekly basis. Sometimes.
Exactly. Anthropic is changing stuff daily.
Yeah.
So how are we expected as a student body or an educational faculty to be able to change at that rate? There's an expectation on students, if you want to get employed, you will do that on your own, which has always been the case. It's just different tools.
Yeah. And maybe I'm a little more old school. I'm always criticizing students nowadays of what things are missing. But I will admit, I think you guys have a unique challenge for your generation in terms of what should design education look like now? What is the definition of an industrial designer, a good employable industrial designer out of school at this point? Even for us, like as we're hiring now too, it's like the definitions are changing for us too, because the capabilities are changing, like the target's moving. I'm curious what you think in the next 5 years, like what should education be aiming for? Since you're like deep in it right now.
Yeah. Knowing that stuff changes so rapidly, a 5-year scale. I've been listening to enough podcasts recently to kind of have an understanding of what some professionals are like prospecting. The caveat is that these are digital product designers that I'm listening to, but I think every person that wants to get hired will have the capacity to work every role just a little bit. Every employable person will be a little bit of an engineer, a designer, a project manager. I think because these tools are giving us the ability to execute these things at such a rapid pace and at such a high fidelity for the pace, the expectation is there that you can do X, Y, and Z. If you can't do X, Y, and Z, we'll look at someone else. Another thing that I'm kind of paraphrasing what someone said. I forget exactly the podcast, Lenny's podcast maybe, but they were saying that it's no longer the brands that are in your resume. So when you see that someone had worked at Apple and Logitech and NVIDIA, that's no longer the criterion that we're looking for. It's how someone is executing something. When maybe you interview someone and they sit down over there at a computer and they're doing work and you're sitting here watching them, that's the crucial point. Yeah. From what I'm predicting for the next 5 years is like, how are they going from idea to end product? Yeah. What are the tools they're using in there? How efficient is it? Yeah.
Yeah, because I think right now, especially with AI, it's like easy to get caught up in saying, oh, it does all these things, but it actually does a very middle part of the process, but it's the endpoints to your point, the beginning of instructing the intent, knowing like where you want to go, and then the endpoint of curating the best results. So pretty interesting.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Since you're mentioning about how students have a very different workload right now and how learning is experienced. Yeah. Do you think it was more difficult for your generation in learning industrial design or the current generation?
I think as a whole, it's probably more difficult for you guys to learn than it was for us. But I think the environment that my generation was in, and again, like I'm only starting to embrace that I'm in the now considered more in the old school generation. Sure. Because I've had my teachers and instructors always say, oh, you guys have it so easy, right? So just to give context, I think we as a group of designers have gotten a lot better, I think, about EQ and understanding what abuse is, right? Yeah. So like when I went to school, it is very normal for instructors to be what I would say people would think is abusive nowadays, like ripping stuff off walls, cussing at you, throwing it in the trash, saying that you don't even get to critique because your work just sucks.
Why would you show up with this?
And it's like publicly shaming, but to me, I never saw that as a negative. When I researched industrial design and I read Core 77 forums about how Art Center was in the 90s and things like that, or even San Jose State in the 90s.
Yeah,
Like
very different.
I've heard, stories of that's how it is and it's tough critique and that's how you build the most excellent designers. So for me, maybe because that was like, those were the types of instructors and that I had, it was a super competitive environment. I think to the point where maybe a little bit too competitive, to the point where it's, they're not going to show you what they're doing and then they come in with 50 sketches the next day. I think from what I've seen and observed, it seems your generation is a lot more collaborative, which is good in some ways, but the level of workload and expectation, the bar, the standard, I don't know that it's lower per se, but it's just, at least from what I've seen, a lot of new grads, whether I interview or hired, the level of expectation of, oh, this is enough. Of course, I've done enough Photoshop, I've learned enough on this. And I think there's a gap there of self-reflection of you actually have a lot more 10,000 hours to go to actually get proficient at a skill. So but it's tough for you guys because yes, you have to learn, it's like, I'll critique you guys on like, why does that not look good to you? Why does that look good, right? What are the proportions? And that comes with just a lot of hours of just doing the craft, whether that's carving foam or drawing by hand. I think there's a lot of things in the education side that to me feels like that's what's created my point of view today. Yeah. And with 3D printing and with prompting AI, I think if you're able to do that in school, I think it's cool, but at the same time, we're missing some of that slow osmosis of getting your brain to think that way, and you're shortcutting all that, and then you're just exacerbating it with giving these students a tool that can just give them exactly what they want. And I think that was my fear. Everyone thinks I'm very pro it, and I am, but like, there's that part of me, the craft part, like we're kind of missing that, we're losing that. And the work ethic, I think sometimes gets lost because it's so easy. It's so easy to pump out 50 concepts in VisComp. So if I was able to do it in 5 minutes, like why should I stay late till 3 a.m. to make sure something is right? We can dig into that a little more, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting. And I still think like you mentioned, mocking stuff up and understanding proportion with physical, that's irreplaceable. That has to happen. You have to spend an hour a day, if you're a freshman, like understanding and creating form physically. Because if I'm not spinning it around in my hand, am I doing it in CAD? You have to do it physically.
I think you kind of asked me a great question about comparing and contrasting like design school for me versus like your generation. What do you think is the biggest understanding gap between our generations? Like you guys as graduates coming in, I've heard a lot of students like they can't understand why they can't get a job. Right. And then on the employer side, it's, well, of course, because your portfolio sucks, Exactly. But then I think like at the same time, it's, don't you guys rely on your education to shape and make sure and ensure that you guys are employable? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
The expectation is sometimes like not curated by the school and more or less by just living, breathing, and sleeping in the space. Mm-hmm. And there's people that don't do that. Yeah. And they still have the expectation that they're going to get a job, even though they're not waking up and, listening to news on their way to school or something. Like you have to always be there for it, because like that's what it looks like when you're actually working in the space. Yeah. Like you wake up, you go to do that. Yeah. So do that every day. Yeah. Because I don't think it's an education thing. I do truly think it's like some people are like discounting their own education. Yeah. I think that it's a personal thing, because I see in the different cohorts that I've experienced. So like when I was a freshman, there's like 3 cohorts above me and now there's 3 below me. So I've experienced like 7 cohorts in theory, all so dramatically different, like super competitive. I think the COVID cohort was like 9 people. Like it was like nothing. So it was very different than our cohort, which got to be in person for the first time. And we're super talkative. And then the cohort below us, like very closed off. Yeah. Cohort below them, super talkative. It's just so different. And it really has to do with the atmosphere that you're immersing yourself in.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say that. And actually, now that I think of it, I think it's true. It's like education can only bring you to a certain, doesn't really matter what school you go to. There's superstars that have come out from every school. Of course, there's the art centers, the Academy of Arts, the CC. But to your point, I think the whole reason designers get into this profession is you choose that major because not because you're thinking about money or practicality, you're actually thinking because you're passionate about the career.
Yeah.
And I think the students who fully embrace it and are obsessed with the craft, those are the ones who do really well.
Yeah.
And then professionally as well. It's as much as people want work-life balance, and I think that's important too, but the ones who are obsessed, who actually love this, those are the ones who do really well. So Alec, without getting into anything confidential, but you have, you've done some workshops at San Jose State.
Yeah.
Now you have some work experience here. What's kind of your favorite AI tools, your workflow? What are you liking to use? And, tell me a little bit about your workflow.
Yeah. So to preface, I want to say I do come from San Jose State, and that is such a different lens. We're very research heavy. And so starting from kind of like the beginning, tools that I'm using for research, ChatGPT, not so much right now. I'm using a lot of Gemini, using a lot of Notebook LM. Other than that, for research and then early ideation, VizCom's like a huge one.
Would you say that's your favorite tool?
Yeah, VizCom is absolutely my favorite tool.
Jordan.
Shout out the whole team,
Yeah.
Love it. But it's just such a powerful tool to have a sketch, throw it in, visualize it, and then tweak it from there.
Okay.
Or realize, there's so many things you can realize with that tool.
Yeah.
So it's research tools, visualization tools, and then what else in between am I kind of using? I've been learning Claude and doing a lot of stuff with that recently.
Mm-hmm.
There's some tools that you can build, like specific ones for your own workflow or internal level stuff, but you have to kind of babysit it still right now.
Yeah.
You have to make sure it's working, whereas VizCom is something that just kind of works.
Yeah.
Midjourney for video. I think Midjourney is great for video. I would use it over VizCom right now, and I talked to the VizCom team about that, and they're working on it.
Nice.
But there's just a lot you can do with that. Other things, I mean, those are like the main ones.
Yeah,
those are the heavy lifters.
Yeah, maybe give, for the audience that's listening, and maybe some of them aren't as familiar with VizCom, maybe give them a scenario of like how you're using it, what's happening while you're using it, and why it's giving you such an advantage over a traditional sense of how you would do it.
I think a great one is lighting, because lighting is an interesting space to be in, that you have to physically mock it up. But then again, you have to experience it in a given space to really understand. I don't know if you guys can see the sign here, but that's a vibe when you walk in. It curates an experience. And so showing it in context is crucial. And VizCom's great at that. If I give it a visual that I already have, if I trace that or have a vector of it, and I feed it in with the modify block, and I say, please visualize this in an office workspace, illuminated like neon glow, soft, round edges, product photography quality of 4K HD, just all the buzzwords and then the specifics of what I want. I can visualize that so quick, and I don't have to take LED strip light and pipe it through an acrylic tube and put it up somewhere. I can just see it.
And, I've seen this firsthand with you, like on projects, especially recently. I think we were under the gun with several projects, and you needed to deliver and help the team, and we needed in context things. And I know in my day, we'd have to Photoshop, we'd have to find some stock image, buy that, and then Photoshop it in, and it still doesn't look just right. And I just saw you helping the team. I got you guys. I got the context one, and you would just pump them out in a matter of minutes.
The tool's great at that. Of course, there's things to touch up. I think those are my favorite tools as far as what I'm using. I'm curious, as someone who's leading a design firm, are there tools that you're using more than a designer would?
Yeah, probably. I mean, obviously, before I let it trickle in to you guys, I'll always test it first. So in terms of Midjourney and VizCom, like I've played with those pretty heavily. I played with Newark and Create and those things like that. I think VizCom by far is very good for our process because it allows designer input, right? Like sketching and things of that nature. So I love that. But as far as like non-designer AI tools, I use Claude a lot. I used to use GPT, but I think Claude's, I don't really want to give this away, but like the co-work agents,
Good.
They're really good. Instead of me hiring a bunch of other admin people, I can get a lot done. So without giving too much away, I've been playing a lot with that. I have a team of 5 different agents working on things for me, whether that's tracking revenue, expenses, margin, sales leads, an agent that oversees those other agents, checks their work to make sure they're not giving me lies, and they can run without eating or sleeping, which is pretty interesting.
All the stuff that when you think about, oh, I don't want to do that, like that's what an agent is for.
Yeah. It's freed up a lot of like thinking bandwidth time. So for instance, like when you're a business owner, there's a lot of compliance things, right? You got to file annual reports and things like that. And not to say that you would just like autonomously let it go, but it can do a lot of the front end work for you so that if you need to email people back and forth and wait on things, like it can do that for you. So I'm not just bogged down with just doing admin work all day long. So it's pretty fun.
You said you had a juicy question for me. I'm curious what that is.
Yeah. I think we've had some discussions, you know, like around lunch before, but I'm actually curious. Hey everyone, it's Jon Thai here again from Hatch Duo. Wanted to briefly interrupt you, but wanted to tell you a little bit about Hatch Duo and what we do here. So Hatch Duo is an industrial design and mechanical engineering firm here in the Bay Area. We design consumer electronics, wearables, robotics, and medical devices. So if you are in need of any kind of product development for your hardware needs, you know who to call. You can find out more about us at www.hatchduo.com. And with that, I'll let you get back to the show. Do you think your design generation is too soft? Or do you think my generation and above is just too overbearing and draconian?
Interesting. I do.
And for context, it's about expectations of doing concepts by a certain speed, not getting feelings hurt when rough critiques or just blunt feedback comes through from my end, right? So I'm curious from your end. Yeah.
I do think our generation is more soft, generally.
Okay.
I don't want to.
Why do you think that is, though? Like examples and why and what you like.
Right. I think, like you're saying, like the critique thing, like in a classroom setting, stuff isn't getting torn down. And obviously, this isn't architecture, which is like more notorious for that. But like, nobody, if you're tearing something down off the wall, it's like, it was a Viscom rendering that was printed on 11 by 17.
Yeah.
It's a very different emotional experience.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect in that sense where it's like, it's not a Copic mark rendering that I was, you know, hunched over a drafting table making for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So if someone tears my Viscom rendering that I did in 30s, I'm not torn over it. But I think like a verbal feedback is a lot more soft. It's kind of nudge. And again, like this is coming from SJSU.
Because you can get recorded and canceled, basically.
I still think like I absolutely have professors, or like I'm thinking of a professor that does this. It's like they will give feedback that because they know the students well, they're like, and they preface at the beginning of the semester, they're like, if I'm pushing the boundaries, let me know. And they push the boundaries.
Yeah.
So that's an experience that we still get, but it's like you have to fall into the shoe, or like you don't get to pick that experience. Right?
Yeah.
You fall into it.
And do you think, I guess it's tough though, because like there's decorum and there's etiquette and things that like EQ and things that we got to consider nowadays that maybe like back in the day, like they did not just care at all. Yeah. And do you think that serves us or hurts us as a profession down the line?
I think,
because I've heard both sides of it and I can agree both sides too, but at least on my end, I feel like we've gotten a little too soft in terms of just the, you know, the outcome that we want is we want to be the best designers, but we're kind of unwilling to do the hard grinding work and the stuff no one wants to talk about in order to get there, right?
I think the EQ and all of the verbal abuse or any of that level of stuff, the reprimanding isn't necessary. I think it's the not so gentle nudge that makes someone uncomfortable and lets them realize X, Y, or Z. And it doesn't have to be harsh words, actions, etc. It can just be like putting the fire under someone's ass, basically, right?
Yeah.
Let them know that it's there.
Yeah.
Let them know that there's a flame that's burning. And if they're not actively trying to put it out or put themselves in a new place, it's going to burn them up.
Yeah. And here's something I'll share, some vulnerability. I'll be careful not to get too specific so that no one gets called out. But as a business owner, as a design firm, studio owner, I'm learning as well, right? I think when I first started the firm, it's like how I do it is how you guys should do it. And credit to Blake, I think a few years ago, we've got to start figuring out how to communicate to the younger generation, because how we were trained and how we did things and what resonated with or what made us tick, it does not work the same way for you guys. Some case in points, it's like some of the tough love stuff I've learned over time, it doesn't necessarily work with certain personalities. For the longest time, I thought remote work is completely possible, full remote work. I mean, that's how we had to start. What I've learned over time is, at least recently with a lot of fresh grads, you guys need oversight. You guys need mentorship where someone can just look over your shoulder and be like, why are you doing it that way? Let me show you instead, because versus meeting you on Slack asynchronously and then finding out that you just spent 8 hours doing something that I could have showed you like a quick Photoshop trick. And so, yeah, I've struggled as an employer or as a design manager to be like, hey, because you guys are more junior, I need you guys to now come into the office. And post-COVID, I think that's been a huge struggle of me feeling like, how much easier can it get? You guys get to do stuff in pajamas. Now I'm asking to come in so that I can help you guys. And there's this resistance to it, but yet they still want to be great designers.
I don't think any new grad wants to hear this, but honestly, I think it's no longer about your learning and education and building a skill set. It's about getting a deadline hit. It's about making sure that the result happens. And what happens in between there, you just got to hit it. And the tools and skill set that you use to get there, I mean, you have to have someone that knows the way to do that. And having them in person is completely crucial.
And I think it's not just your generation too. I think just now, the times now, it's like people put a lot of focus on work-life balance. And I think that's tough for a career like ours. Sports, design, things of that nature where you kind of put your all into it. It's like, how can you say that I'm going to shut it off at 5 p.m.? But from my observation, at least, and this is just from my perspective, people are like, well, I want work-life balance. I'm turning it in and this is what you're going to get, you know? Right. And then they wonder why they're not good.
That's interesting. Nicole from Level, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She graduated from my school.
Yeah. I know the design bubble is small, and I've heard that Level has really good work-life balance. Have you talked to Nicole about that?
I actually haven't had any conversation with her about work-life balance too much, but I'd be curious like how she makes it work.
I don't know the ins and outs of it. Have you been to the studio?
I've been to the studio. It's really nice.
Yeah. Really nice.
Maybe we should have her on the show and talk to her about that.
That could be interesting. Yeah, if she's willing to drive down.
Yeah. Do you feel it's acceptable pressure to pressure new grads or designers, whether they're new grads or not, to learn AI right now or not be employed? Or do you think that's an unreasonable ask? Obviously, from our end, from Hatch's end, to work here, you kind of need to understand AI.
There's specific firms that wouldn't care to ask that, right? I know someone that interviewed at Branch recently and asked about their ideation process and how they sketch. They said, we only do analog. And they're pretty set on that, right? You know, someone at Branch, correct me, but from what I understand, there's still studios that are very tapped into the traditional way of doing that. And that's fine. That's completely fine. There's a certain amount of craft and love and respect that goes into doing that, and it'll create different results. I think using AI is still in its experimental stages. The benefits are obvious, they're apparent, but who's to say that it's better, right? I can get results out faster, but are they the results I want? Are they actually faster if I just know how to sketch better? There's trade-offs. I don't think there has to be an expectation that you understand all these AI tools, especially when I can sit someone down and put them in front of VisCom, and after an hour, they have cool stuff. There's a small learning gap to getting the basics. The learning curve it's shallow and then it spikes, right? So it's very exponential.
Yeah.
To get that last 10 to 5% of understanding and like refinement, that's the difficult part.
Yeah. So do you feel like artificial intelligence tools for designers lowers the standards, like lowers the bar of excellence, or raises it, or how do you feel about that? Because, and the reason I'm asking is I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, definitely get a lot of trolls sometimes where it's, like people who do AI suck, you know? There's a lot of the traditional, I would say like even older school than me that just feels, if you're a design firm that uses AI, you guys have to use it because you guys suck. But I don't really care because I know that even analog, even before this, we can do good award-winning work. But how do you feel about that?
I think the quality of work is going to be higher on average because AI can make stuff really pretty, really quick. But when I zoom in and I look at this stuff close up, I can't show the initial rendering to a client, or I can't put this in a portfolio. It takes time to nail the details, and the time that you're spending nailing those details is also the time that you're spending in CAD, making sure stuff is dimensionally correct, and all these things that would create the details.
Yeah.
So you're trading off in a way, but I do think bare minimum visuals are going to be higher level sooner.
Okay.
I mean, I could ask you for our like initial ideation, what we're showing to clients.
Yeah.
The stuff that we're showing now, I imagine completely different fidelity than
Completely.
3 years ago.
Yeah, when we do it, it's definitely not just straight out of the slot machine, so to speak, right? It's more used as a thinking tool for us, and then we're using any and all means of manual to go about finishing up the design, all of that. And I think like we take a little pride in that. Yeah, AI is very accessible. It means that anyone, factory, client, student, can go and pump out some stuff on Viscom, but they cannot pump it out the same way like we would, because we have our superpower and we know how to translate that into feasible stuff.
Yeah,
So
and that last 5 to 10% is the designers here. Like,
Exactly.
Understand that depth and level of the tool.
yeah, it's what's that saying? Ideas are cheap, but it's all about execution, right? So just to switch gears a little bit, I had a question for you about just, there's probably a lot of students listening, design students all over the world. What did you feel like served you to help you feel prepared at an internship like Hatch, where we're, Bay Area consulting, stereotypically fast-paced? Like maybe give some examples of what helps you and what you had to kind of struggle with and learn here or kind of on your own.
The first thing that comes to mind for what helps me as a student trying to get an internship and employment is networking. And it's similar to the talking about working remote versus in person. Go to SF Design Week, go to Square One, go to all these conferences, events, be there. I will show up to these whenever I can, and I see the same faces over and over. It's a repetition thing. Everything's about repetition. When I see Cole Derby, or when I see all these people for this second, third, fourth time, they start to remember my name. They start to know what I'm doing. It's a small community. I'm talking about the Bay Area, but the same goes for New York, Arizona, Oregon, Seattle, Michigan, all these places. There's a design enclave there, and if you're not interacting with it physically, that's your biggest failure. So that's what I would recommend as far as what you can do now, what you can put yourself out and do. And then things that, like experiences or other things that I feel like nailed the nail in the coffin for me, if this is do or die. And I think realizing that student projects at school like aren't it. The stuff that you're getting fed through the curriculum is there to frustrate you. Like, again, it's like we don't have a portfolio that we need to apply. So you're taught the basics first year. Like how to sketch, perspective, your horizon lines, all of that, vanishing points. So a lot of the projects are there so that you learn these things. And if you come out of school without that learning, that's very bad. Like you have to have that. But once you grasp and understand that, use the resources to do your own things, personal projects that, like, for example, I had a semester that was going slow. One of my professors was like, the curriculum was like a week behind and it was super slow. And I was like, I literally just got home, laid down on my bed, opened Instagram, saw a design challenge, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to do that. And I did. I sat down for 3 weeks, poured my heart into this project, didn't win anything, but man, was it fun. Was it cool that I learned so many things that I didn't because of the curriculum. And you have to be doing that. You have to be living, breathing, eating, sleeping, design.
Can you give an example of working here without giving client confidentiality away, of just like where you felt like, whoa, this is what working is like versus like this was school? Was there a difference, or maybe transition was very easy for you? No big deal.
Wasn't easy, tell you that.
Maybe you can give a story, right? I think those are always fun.
I'm trying to think of a good story. Well, one thing that comes to mind is we had our first progress check-in, and I sat down and talked with you and Blake, and I had mentioned that I was just surprised that the very initial parts of the design process are very much understanding the competitors and the competing space. And drawing from those, not copying, but understanding the decisions they made and looking at those products and asking why for everything.
Yeah.
Like, why did they do a rubber seal around here? Why did they, why is the electronics package here? And why is this surface? That was a huge thing. Doing a mood board and looking it up and Google Scholaring a PDF report, that's not enough.
Yeah.
Go to Target, buy something, tear it apart, right? And we do that at SJSU, but the scale at which you're able to do it at a firm is so much different.
Yeah.
Getting to, send off CAD to a vendor to get initial prototypes. You can't simulate that at a school.
Yeah. And what about speed and pace? And the reason I'm asking you this is from my observation, back when I was an intern, it's for the most part, we're kind of bottom of the barrel of here, design a button or something, while the seniors design like mainly of this thing and then help in and jump in when you can. Not all places. There's definitely some places where I got to really dig in. But here I've noticed, I'm like, wow, Alec's actually able to contribute because you're using AI. Like, how has that given you an advantage in terms of meeting some of these speed requirements that I've seen traditionally prior to artificial intelligence? A lot of fresh grads really struggle.
Well, I'm curious, and I'll bring the question back to you, but the initial phases of ideation, I don't know how much an intern when you were interning would do, but right now it's like all hands on deck. And with AI tools, gosh, do you have such an advantage?
Yeah.
Being able to take, because you understand perspective, take a sketch, throw it in there, refine it, tell it what materials are there, boom. I have 5 concepts when someone has 5 sketches, and mine define material, lighting, surfacing. And that's such a huge advantage. And that's why someone with an AI toolkit as a student or a grad is able to contribute so much.
I think that's an advantage. Looking back on when I was an intern, I think they use us for volume of ideas, right? And then they kind of curate. We were basically the Viscom. Pumping out ideas, and just what you're able to do now, like you guys would wipe the floor with us with how much you can output. So I think it's cool.
I think another thing that isn't AI toolkit related, but is still like extremely crucial for a new grad to have in their toolkit is understand from what you can in an education, understand how something actually has to be a part. It has to be manufactured. And that's such an oversight for a lot of students. Early prototyping and ergonomic testing for our current project, crazy. You have to know that parts are existing within housings and all of these things that it's just, if you don't know how to mock that up physically and work with it without AI tools, you're drowning.
One last fun question before we roll on to some other stuff. Being that this is the first time you've worked at Hatch, what were some things that were true and what were things that you found were false?
About the studio and like my perspective of it? Well, the perspective that I had was that it was remote, and coming in, it being like a physical studio now, like jarring, completely different than the expectation that when I saw you guys posted like the Helios project on our AI exploration page, I remember seeing that as a sophomore or something, right? And being like, whoa, this is cool. I thought it was a real thing. I didn't have the consciousness and perspective of, a full-fledged designer. I was a student. I was like, this is great work. They shipped this. Of course, it is a spec product that just lives on a website, but seeing that and being like, wow, that's happening like a door down, basically. That was the perspective I had. I was like, this is the big studio that's right next to SJSU. And being here now in like a physical space and understanding the client load with the amount of designers there are, like it's a small studio. And the client load that we're working with is, you wouldn't think that it's possible. But with AI tools and with a team that understands how to work remote, like it's surprising how effective it is implemented into a physical studio. Understanding remote is a crazy advantage and actually allows for way more depth and communication, even when everybody's physical.
Cool. Anything that was false?
Gosh, I mean, it's not like you guys had any bad juju or, any taboo stuff that I can name off. So I think everything was true. As far as I'm concerned, like I didn't hear any.
Cool. So I asked you things about true or false. What's one thing that surprised you that you found was more important than you had realized? once you started working as a designer?
I think there's a couple of things. The first one, like I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'd actually initially interviewed with you and not gotten the offer. I didn't get an offer, right? And I had class with the person that did. And I sat down and he came in, he sat down next to me. I was like, how's it going? All this and that, congratulations. And he was giving me some feedback and tips on this. And he was like, yeah, they reached out to me over email and he said, thank you. You're the only person that said thank you. And I was like, oh crap. I didn't even think of that. And I imagine there's an expectation that a lot of people have, but I just like over my head. And then when I came in and interviewed the second time, that was the first thing that I did. I said, thanks for having this meeting with me. And then thank you at the end and thank you in the follow-up email. Just make sure it's happening. And then as far as like other shockers, I don't know, like the studio is small, but so energetic. And I think that was just
like the dance videos.
Yeah. Like the energy is so there and it's, I don't know, it's a powerhouse. It's like mitochondria. It's like tiny little thing, but it is just always going. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. And yeah, the thank you thing is funny. Honestly, it's like a very small part of it. But if, when it comes to the small things, it means big things too. And I think professionalism is like a huge thing for us too. And, just being grateful for the time and like we notice those things. If push comes to shove, like we notice those things. Appreciate it.
It absolutely makes sense. And you explained this to me in retrospect. I was like, man, was I dumb? Of course you should do that. So every new grad out there, make sure you're sending a thank you email, follow up, thank you at the end of the Zoom meeting, whatever it is, just make sure it happens.
With that, I think it's funny. It's kind of a comedic thing, but aside from the thank yous, were there any other things advice you could give to students out there that maybe they're accidentally missing? That may help them,
right?
Whether that's to be employable or to succeed once they're employed.
I think it's a numbers game. Send out a lot of stuff. Make sure you're sending out quality content, like curate everything. It's a portfolio, it's a website, whatever. Send out a cover letter, like all the stuff. Make sure you're front loading so that when you get to the interview, like you have all the resources you need. Don't have like half of it and then get the interview and be scrambling.
Yeah.
Always have questions in the interview. That's a must. One thing that one of our designers actually taught me about for interviews, ask a question, ask what the last intern didn't do to their expectations and be like they weren't able to get X thing done in time. Oh, like I'm great with that. Like I love doing Photoshop. Like, I love doing this. Be friendly about it, not cocky, but let them know that you're leveling up their game.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that's really good.
That's like from having a portfolio to getting to the interview and then like actually getting in the space. I think just do your due diligence and be there for the first 2 weeks and give it your all. Sacrifice some things, honestly. Like we already talked about how athletes and designers have to put their all into it. Like those initial days of like your impression on someone. Crucial.
And for those of you who don't know, like I come in pretty early when I come in. I come at 8, sometimes 7. Alec is here too. Like he's usually like 99% of the time he's here early too without me having to ask. And I think that makes a huge difference because you're young, right? Like you got to put in the 10,000 hours, so you're getting ahead and you're jumping in there, getting early. I think it's a good trait as well, getting in early.
Make sure you're doing that. That's a must. Like do things they don't ask you because what they ask you is bare minimum. So be exceeding that.
And you're as enthusiastic as you are with helping with concepts and mock-ups as you are with cleaning up the shop. And I think like attitude and enthusiasm is everything too. So that'd be some advice for me. With that, I had so much fun chatting with you today, Alec.
Thank you.
Like really provided some insights, and I think we had some good banter about, old school, new school. I think a lot of our listeners and viewers today can really glean a lot from your experience, not only interning here, but just how you talked about AI tools and things like that and how it's affecting your education and employment as a designer. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this. And if you want to hear more of this, feel free to leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our newly podcast, right?
Yeah.
Right, Jason? It's on Spotify. Subscribe to that as well. There'll be more great things coming.
New grads, comment, send in your portfolio, anything, interact.